Woordfees 2020 is an Afrikaans festival embracing all who speak Afrikaans. Debates, author discussions, theatre, movies get key focus. Now, this year's edition in Stellenbosch is arguably the most diverse yet, with the theme Keep On Keeping On in both English and Afrikaans, which reflects a festival which has come a long way since its inception 21 years back. Marcelle Gordon is speaking to a variety of people who are part of this year's festival, and she joins me now live from Stellenbosch. Again, Marcelle, hopefully the sun is coming out. Yes, the sun has come out. There's a bit more light behind you. Marcelle, you've got a couple of authors lined up for us.
Indeed, Tony, we've organised for the sun to be up, at least for our second crossing, as we lead up to the beginning of what's expected to be a very busy day at Woordfees 2020. Keep on keeping on is the loose theme for this edition of the Arts Festival, and that's how they're referring it to. Some would say it is the biggest arts festival of this kind in South Africa right now, and after 21 years we really have seen an evolution of this festival. The fact that they have a payoff line that is in both English and Afrikaans, speaking to them trying to attract not just what would be seen as a traditional Afrikaans speaking market, but all South Africans who they hope will find stories that are relevant to them being told here, either in book form, in plays, in readings, in debates, music, as well as dance performances that have been taking place. Authors obviously was at the core of Woordfees when it really first started, that direct translation being the Festival of Words. And I have with me two authors of one of the books that's been featured at this year's Woordfees, For the Love of the Land. And I've got the co-authors of the book, Ivor Price as well as Kobus Lourens, with me this morning. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Kobus, forgive me, I'm just going to start with Ivor to begin with. Ivor is a broadcaster, a journalist of more than 20 years. You've worked in television as well as radio. Before we talk about this latest labour of love and passion of yours, you've been coming to Woordfees for years now already. Afrikaans is your mother tongue. It's a language that you work in, that you love in. It's your soul language. Where do you feel Woordfees 2020 finds itself right now? Is it an arts festival that truly is embracing all who speak it?
Just moments ago, Marcelle, before I arrived here, I noticed that the notice boards in Stellenbosch are now available in 3 languages, Afrikaans, English and isiXhosa. And I thought, how amazing, how far we have come as a country, certainly as a province, the Western Cape, and this town, Stellenbosch. There are many arts festivals in the country, but Woordfees most certainly one of the most exciting, also one of the most diverse, celebrating art in its purest form. Without it being exclusive. You know, young and old. It's sort of an intellectual festival where people get to debate about stuff that matters, not just listening to doof doof socky socky music, you know.
And on that, and part of the reason why we wanted to be here this year is that often when issues around Afrikaans are spoken about, specifically in the more mainstream media, there's a certain face that is put on the language. Right-wing people looking for attention on social media. We won't mention any names, but if you look at statistics saying that more than 50% of Afrikaans speakers in South Africa are indeed black, that is really not the face of Afrikaans, is it? But are those platforms, those important platforms that are the gatekeepers of the language, reflecting that back to society?
It's easy to diss Afrikaans because of its history, which is very complicated, but not many people know that Afrikaans has become a language of liberation. So far from 1976, 2020, where we are today, in fact, it's a black language with roots firmly in this province, in the Western Cape, in this country.
And the first people to write it were indeed black as well.
The first people to write it were indeed black, with Muslim roots as well. It's an exciting language, and I'm quite grateful that many people are now getting opportunities to express themselves in this language, in the arts, actually in all forms of Afrikaans.
Now, speaking about being able to express yourselves and things that you find passionate about, let me bring Kobus in here, your colleague, the co-author. You guys are going to share a microphone here, as you've shared quite a bit of your time. You know each other, you and Ivor. Kobus, if I can ask you just to step a little bit forward. You guys know each other. You met as reporters at Die Burger over 20 years ago, and here you're standing as co-authors of a book called For the Love of the Land. Tell us about where that project started for you.
Sure, it's come a long way. I think it actually started with Ivor's TV show that he presented, I think 2 years back, Landbou Weekliks, which had him traveling the country, visiting farmers and hearing their stories. And that started a discussion. He realized that the perception that he had of farmers, it was challenged by these meetings with actual farmers. And he said, he kept remembering, realizing that there's a clash between what he thought farmers were and how they were when he actually met them. And then we started talking and thought, what could we do about this or with this? And we decided to start this website called Food for Mzansi, where we try and tell a very diverse sort of crop of farmers' stories, everything, all races, all sexes, all ages, and it's become the place where you can see a version of South African agriculture that you don't see anywhere else, because as most things in South Africa, it's very kind of divided. There's
politicized
and
as well.
Politicized, yeah. So I think we're the only platform that brings the different parts of agriculture together, and we're also the only one that speaks to the normal person in the street. We're not just talking agriculture to agriculture.
And what has struck you the most about this project? What is the thing that struck you the most? That a diversity of stories, or perhaps that so many of those stories have far more in common than many would think?
Yeah, it was really a privilege to do this, but, because once we started digging into these stories, we both realized that our perceptions were totally wrong, that there's just so many more kinds of farmers with so many more stories, and everybody actually, that's why the book is called For the Love of the Land, because these people, what binds them together is this, it's almost a belief in that what they're doing is building towards the future, and they are turning this resource, which is land, into food, and they are feeding a nation by doing it. And it doesn't matter if they are rich or poor or black or white, the mission is the same.
If I can bring you in here, we were talking off air earlier, and you're talking about how one of the things you really had to grapple with in putting the story together is the politicization. I don't know, I think I might have butchered that word. I've been speaking Afrikaans for the last few days here in Stellenbosch, of the word farmer, and indeed the translation in Afrikaans being boer. Talk to me about that.
I was raised about 15 kilometers from where we're standing here in Kraaifontein, and where I'm from, we don't call the police, we call the boere.
Yep.
The word farmer has become almost a swear word in this country. And when we were writing this book, I kept on hearing the voice of my late grandfather, who I reference in the first chapter. And he used to say the only good farmer is a dead farmer, because of our problematic past. And I wish that my grandfather was still alive, so I could show him the diversity of how agriculture has changed. Many people, when you ask them about farming and farmers, they see this typical picture of a white Afrikaans male. And the statistics show us that there are about 40,000, if I remember correctly, white commercial farmers left, mostly commercial, meaning they're bigger, but 400 black farmers. 400,000 black farmers. And most people don't recognize their efforts. Most of them might be small-scale farmers, but they're still contributing, doing their best to contribute to food security. And I guess that's the kind of diversity that we wanted to show. Also, we are of the opinion that 10 years from now, most of the food we eat in this country will come from black female farmers, because that's where most of the effort is going, from government side, commodity organizations. But people don't know that. They just see the one section feeding themselves, and people don't have the respect for farmers.
What are you hearing from those black farmers specifically? We speak about the love of the land. The ownership of that land that they love is a big question as well. There might be a smaller number of white farmers, but they would be operating on a much bigger scale. Is the ownership of land and access to that land for black farmers something that's top of mind for them?
Of course, ownership is a big issue in this country. We wanted to move the debate away from just give back the land to for the love of the land. But of course, black farmers need access to land. Many of them are stuck as tenants of government, and it's not organized agriculture's fault, it's actually government's fault. Putting black farmers on long-term leases up to 99 years. What that means in practical terms is that despite your success, you can never access finance because nobody's going to give you a loan to grow because you don't anything. So government will need to make some serious decisions to put their money where their mouths are and to support black farmers who are doing their very best. Lots of success stories also out there. I think 20 years ago, government had made a lot of mistakes and the land ended up in the wrong hands, the wrong black hands as well, who made a mess of it. But there's a new generation on the ground, and it's an exciting thing happening at the moment. People passionate about agriculture, about feeding us. And they're not getting the recognition or the land that they deserve.
Well, indeed, your portal, your book is trying to set that straight. Ivor Price as well as Kobus Lourens, the co-authors of the book For the Love of the Land, but also the men behind the web portal www.foodformzansi.co.za. I've had a look at just some of the stories that they tell there in a multi-medium form, and it really is fascinating and give us a real different, diverse picture of South African agriculture. So do check that out for some great storytelling as well. This just one of the books, some of the interesting people that have been put a spotlight on here at Woordfees 2020, and we'll be bringing you a little bit more over the next 2 hours or so. Back to you, Tony.